here we go once again, everybody. God. I'll tell mate. Really? Really now? Not you two. Hello, how's it going? I mean, I'm not dead yet, despite the best efforts of considerable portions of our criminal underworld. Whatever the case may be, welcome back once again, everybody. My name is still Mitsuno Bedoy, and this is the next episode of Kamaitachi no Yoru Rinne Saisei. Yeah, hello Nia, hello Otome. I'm just waiting for it at this point. Nia's shown her face, it's only a matter of time. On how yesterday went on, I mean, I guess. Sure, I like knowing things. Hit me. I mean, don't, like, hit me. I would appreciate if you did not do that. It was awesome. Oh, really? Do tell. Having an awesome day. All of my classmates love me. Well, I suppose there's no accounting for taste. Can't imagine what that's like, honestly. And they're cultured. Ah, yes. I see. They too are men enough to... Alright, we did the bit. Everybody's right where they're supposed to be. Suppose we should probably talk about the game we're playing at some point. When last we left our intrepid heroes... Mitsuno, don't touch me. I don't know where you've been. Doctor, well... I had to get up early for work, but then when I showed up, work didn't open in time, so I got up early for nothing. So that was fun. And now I feel real bad, but not so bad that I'm not prepared to tackle a case of this level. So I had to wait for really long. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, there was an unseasonable storm, roads got closed, everybody was trapped in a closed circle. It was a whole production. I'd tell you more, but the case files haven't been declassified yet. Speaking of cases, when last we left our intrepid heroes... We had just gone through... I have got to get some additional redeems. It's getting predictable. Anyway, we can't go back and go through the chat log. Okay, we've got these redeems. That's cool. That's something. Yes, Nia, we all quake in terror. But whatever the case, when last we left our intrepid heroes, we had just looked in Mr. Tanaka, the probably not a Yakuza, but he looks a lot like a Yakuza's room, and found that his bags were all empty. And that made some gears start spinning in Toru's head, which leads us to today. I addressed myself to everyone gathered there in the lounge. And we get our chance of what to say. I know who killed Mr. Tanaka. I know who killed Midori. I know who's behind all the murders so far. No, we still don't know enough to identify the killer yet. Right, Otome has placed one vote for being suspicious of the owner of the lodge, whatever his name was, Kobayashi. The lodge's owner is Kobayashi. I remember because he has the same name as Detective Kobayashi. The first mystery game I ever... Okay, no, that's not true. The second mystery game So I totally forgot that I had a career before the first hiatus. Second mystery game I ever played on stream, and one I didn't particularly like. What was the first mystery? First mystery game was Sherlock Holmes Chapter 1, developed by Frogwares. An open-world mystery game, something I don't think I've ever seen before. Yeah. Well, that was a fun title. I enjoyed streaming that quite a bit, even if I disagreed with some of the mechanical decisions behind the game. But enough about mysteries we have solved. Let's talk about mysteries we haven't solved. Now, I don't believe either of you were present at the time, but last time we played to this point, I selected the option I know who's behind all the murders so far. And that sort of railroaded us into a decision I wound up disagreeing with. And then we died. So we should probably avoid that path if we can get away with it. So the question of the hour is, what do we know? We found... Let's see, let's review. I barely even remember. Let's see. Doctor, you have to explain what was suspicious about the bag being empty. I still don't get it. Well, Otome. We are at a lodge. A ski lodge. A vacation home, if you will. I'd think someone showing up with empty luggage is rather self-explanatorily suspicious. Now, when we first found it, Mari's first impulse was to say, oh, the culprit must have stolen something from inside of that. Because, you know, that's what you'd assume if you find something missing. But we did discuss this yesterday. Well, not yesterday. Last stream, I do recall. Yesterday, we didn't even play this game. If you were going to steal something that was already in a bag, why wouldn't you just take the bag itself? So, yes, who would stay around with an empty bag for no reason? Yes, that is the question now, isn't it? Of course, what's really important here is what does it imply? What can we deduce from it? Man, is this how the detectives feel when they're playing the curious? Yeah, see. Of course, we must still resolve the question of the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. What? But Holmes. There was no curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. That was the curious incident, and then you just turn around and walk away. Is that how it feels? Man, this is fun. I kinda get where Higure and Co are coming from now. Hey, he meant to put something in the bag, so he was there to steal something. That's a possibility as well. I'm curious what would be worth stealing from a place like this. Can't access, okay, I can access the save point here. Of course, the real question is where can we make our step from here? As I've said, if we just try to take an all-encompassing view and grab everyone at once, that will not work out all that well, I know from experience. So the question of the hour is, what can we deduce? The logical explanation... Well, okay, now logical is a strong word. The most obvious explanation would be... someone stepped in. I mean, the most sensible explanation in my mind would be that this tells us who killed Mr. Tanaka. Because we found something suspicious about Mr. Tanaka's stuff. But Midori was killed because she went to investigate that room again. Of course, we could also say that discretion is the better part of valor and step back. Say we need to do some more investigating before we start tossing around accusations. Midori only told Kobayashi that she was going to the room. I'm not sure if that was true, actually. I don't think they went up to the floor as a group, her and Toshio. And maybe some others. No, I don't think there were some others, but they didn't specify that they'd broken off beforehand. But of course, Toshio is the suspect in this case. Kobayashi was the one who said that she was going to that room to investigate it. Is this your final answer, Tom? Are you? Would you like us to accuse Kobayashi of being the one to kill Midori? Because I have no stake in this race without giving spoilers, so I am entirely prepared to go along with whatever you decide. I want you to accuse who you think it is. I already know who it is, dog. We've been over this already. If we go after who I think it is, we'll just wind up doing spoilers. But if this is the best lead we've got, it's probably worth going into, isn't it? Isn't it, my child? Probably wrong, though. Yeah, probably, but that's half the fun. Yeah, if you don't have anything better to go, I'm gonna go down this route just for the sake of keeping the stream going, if you don't mind.
Midori-sanを殺した犯人は分かったよ。
I know, killed Midori.
緑さんは田中さんを殺した犯人とは別なの？
多分そうだ。僕たちのほとんどが田中さんを殺せなかったわけだからね。
Toshio cut in angrily.
おい、それはつまり、俺は緑は殺してないけど、田中さんは殺したんじゃないかってことか？
まあ、そういうことです。
冗談じゃないぜ。俺は緑も田中さんも殺しちゃいない。
Poor Mr. Tanaka, we don't even know his first name yet. Could that be true? The look in his eyes made it seem like he wasn't lying. And besides, it was still a little weird to think that Midori and Tanaka were killed by two different people. Then, at that very moment, inspiration struck. After this, it didn't relate in any way to murder, but I came up with the idea for the great American novel. Which is extra weird because I'm not even American.
今度こそ分かったよ。緑さんと田中さんを殺した犯人が。
Alright, Toru, your neurons are touched. Let's see what's up.
本当に分かったの？一体誰よ？
I had a dubious look in her eyes. I didn't answer her right away. Instead, I turned to the other people in the room.
窓が割れる音がしたとき、敏夫さん以外の全員が談話室にいました。だから僕は最初、僕たちの中に犯人がいるのなら、
This looks kinda similar to what we got last time. He glared right back at them.
でもトリックを使えば、あの時談話室にいた人にも犯行が可能だったと気がついたんです。
As I spoke, I saw the tension in Toshio's jaw ease slightly.
トリックって？
Mari asked the question everyone was thinking.
時間差のトリックだよ。
時間差？時間差攻撃とかのあの時間差？
そうだよ。僕たちは窓が割れる音を聞いて2階へ駆けつけた。でもあの時本当に窓が割れたのかどうかわからない。
Alright, this is the exact same thing you said last time, Toru.
だって窓は割れてたじゃないか。
Alright, can we skip? Okay, we can't skip. That means we've read all this before. Okay, no, this is the exact same route we went down last time. That's unfortunate. Alright, so to review, basically, just says a bunch of like vague stuff about how there could have been a trick, but he doesn't have any idea what it was, and none of his answers really work. The game didn't tell us to accuse someone, right? No, if you take that option, he just decides on his own. Hold on. Alright, so to review. So Toru says, hey, just because we heard the sound of glass shattering doesn't mean glass shattered. And then everybody immediately points out all the flaws in that logic, but we just kind of go with it. I think we were meant to say we know who killed Mr. Tanaka. So do I. So do I. So if you notice, got my thoughts before responding. Mari, hogwash. Toshio, calm down. In the end, we break things down and we point out that the only person who doesn't have an alibi for both cases is Mr. Kayama, the company president. So now the question of the hour is if we stick to the end of this path just for the sake of completionism, or if we want to go back and say we know who killed Mr. Tanaka now. Because there is a split here on top of what we got last time. So we could get closer to 100% completion just by sticking with it. I don't really know what would change if we said we weren't entirely certain in our theory. Part of me does kind of want to go back and... like, your choice, Doctor. Yeah, alright. I think I'm gonna... could lead into something interesting in the future. I know who killed Mr. Tanaka. Alright. This is what actually connects to the thing we were investigating.
本当に分かったの？一体誰よ？
I had a dubious look in her eyes. That's the same line again.
窓が割れる音がしたとき、敏夫さん。
Whoever told you. Okay, no, this is literally the same again. Okay, game, I see how it is. See, this is before they figured out what mystery games actually were. So... makes me to admit we're dummies and say we know nothing. Yeah, but that's not fun. And also, we absolutely do have enough evidence to say who killed him. You know what, I wanna get this out of the way now. So I'm gonna stick on this path first. Last time... Alright, so to review. If we assume that the exact moment we heard the glass breaking was trick of some sort, apparently Toru was too dumb to figure out exactly what it was, then the person who doesn't have an alibi for killing Tanaka before we heard that, and the person who also doesn't have an alibi for bonking Mikimoto, and the person who doesn't have an alibi for killing Midori, those three options, cross-check all three of them, the person we get is Kayama the President. Now, last time we went through, we decided to stick with our guns. Chat voted to stick with our guns, even though we weren't really... okay, I wasn't really confident in that theory. And it, went poorly. So let's admit that we've got our doubts. I mean, this theory is obviously full of holes. They hesitated a moment before answering.
自信ないって、そんなことじゃ困るじゃないか。
Yeah, well, it's not my fault the game didn't actually give me a chance to say who I thought the culprit was. They just decided it was Kayama. Tojo erupted at me.
困るって言われても、僕の考えはさっき言った通りです。それが正しいと思うかどうか、皆さんで判断してください。
Everyone in the room looked at one another. Mari spoke up first.
私はトールの推理を信じるわ。だって他に考えようがないもの。
That's a fantastic way of solving crimes, Mari. Just put that and you might be able to become a side character police detective who's constantly depending on others for solving their cases for them. A cushy job that has no requirements, so it's actually a pretty good deal. A few of the others nodded.
ちょっと待たんかい。まさか多数決かなんかで決めるつもりはないやろな。
多数決。それもいいかもしれないけど、ここは一つ裁判といこうぜ。俺たちは民主国家の国民なんだし。
Okay, let's begin with a basic explanation of the class trial. In short, your votes will determine the results. God, that's really hard. Toshi's lips twisted into a smile.
裁判
Trial? You really memorized that. You know, the funny thing is, I don't even like Danganronpa all that much. It's a perfectly average, forgettable mystery series. Caught up in a lot of flash and pomp and circumstance. I wasn't sure Toshio was taking this.
そうだ。トール君が検事で、俺たちは陪審員だ。弁護は本人か奥さんがやればいい。全員一致で有罪ってことになったら、その時は。
Man, but I don't want to be the prosecutor. It's the least interesting role.
まさか殺すっちゅうんや。
I mean, we could. It'd probably be really funny.
そうしてやりたいところだけどな。閉じ込めておくってのがせいぜいだろう。
The accuser, his wife, can seek for the defense. What kind of rule is that? Well, it's like Calvin Ball rules. There are no rules. And also no one else is volunteering. That's kind of important too. Although Toshio sounded disappointed, Kai sounded disappointed. Not sounded like a disappointment, that's my gimmick. I'll thank you to respect my roles. Kayama's face lit up with relief.
それで気が済むんやったら好きにしたらええ。
それじゃ、トール君。告発を始めてくれ。
Alright, here we go. I wasn't thrilled at being thrown into this position, but everyone was looking at me expectantly. Yeah, I feel that. Seeing no other option, I began speaking in the solemn tone I'd so often heard in TV courtroom dramas. You know, my experience with courtroom dramas mostly comes down to Ace Attorney, so solemn is not exactly the word choice I would go with here.
加山誠一さんを田中なんだっけ、まあいいか。田中さんおよび篠崎みどりさん殺害。
一応僕への暴行も。
Dr. Midori, if I remember back in my recommendation, do I have to answer every single question for it? No, not at all. Just tell me what you want me to answer. Just what you're thinking right now. Like, if you have strong feelings about one of those questions, answer that one. If you have strong feelings about a question I did not ask, answer me that one. Don't forget about the attack on me. Oh, hey, Mikimoto. Aren't you dead yet? You have very severe brain damage. Mikimoto sounded apologetic.
および三木本さんへの暴行傷害の容疑で告発したいと思います。
One count of aggravated assault against Mr.
大体のこ
Mikimoto.
とはさっき言いましたから、要点を整理して述べます。田中さんを殺すことができ、なおかつ三木本さんを殴ることができたのは加山さんだけです。よって加山さんが犯人だと思われます。
加山さん、 無罪を主張しますか?
Toshio asked sarcastically. Alright, the Honorable Judge Toshio presiding. You know, I do believe him.
では弁護側の反論を。
Defense may now present its case.
そんな猿芝居が続けられるかい。やってへんもんはやってへん。俺しか言うことないわい。
And that's all I have to say about that.
そうですか。じゃあ、評決を取ってみましょう。彼が有罪だと思う人は?
This is a really solid judicial system you have there, kids. I'm glad it's working out for you. Toshio was the first to raise his hand. Mine went up next, and I felt obligated to raise mine as well. Eventually, almost everyone's hands lifted hesitantly into the air. The only one still lowered belonged to the Kobayashis and Haruko, Kayama's wife.
では、無罪だと思う人は?
Anyone here think he's not guilty? Kayama's hand shot into the air. But to my surprise, neither Haruko nor the Kobayashis raised theirs.
どういうことです?
Kobayashi winced a bit as he responded.
わからない。どっちとも判断がつかないってことだ。
加山さんの奥さんもそうなんですか?
Toshio seemed astonished. Haruko bit her lip and looked away from her husband.
おい、ハルコ、まさかわしのことが信用できんちゅんやないやろな。え？どういうことなんや？言うてみ。
She kept her eyes averted and refused to answer him. Toshio decided not to pursue the matter any further and brought the trial to a close. Man, I feel downright blueballed.
参入は危険とみなしていいでしょう。全員一致で有罪と
These
決定
three
し
can
ま
be
した。
considered abstentions, which means the jury has voted unanimously for guilty. Which again is the same path we were on last
勝手
time.
にせ。
Alright, good
閉じ込め
talk,
ておく場所はやっ
folks.
ぱり地下室がいいでしょうね。
Alright, I don't like the number of choices this game is throwing at us that just take me back on the same path. Toshi went over to the front desk, and yep, we're back on the main road. So we lock Hayama down in the cellar to keep him from escaping, while we wait for the storm to clear up. And there we go. Come on, give me something that'll break us off the main path. I know this game has so much stuff to offer. These arcane systems are getting in my way. Alright. I actually don't remember what we did last time. Okay, last time we were here, we decided to huddle together to keep safe. So this time, let's not do that. Maybe if we provoke the culprit into acting, we'll get some new to work with Criminy. But I was hesitant to propose we spend the night together in one of our rooms. I felt a little uneasy about turning off the lights, so we left everything as it was, and went upstairs. As we followed Mikimoto up the stairs, he teetered backwards for a moment. This is the same as last time.
大丈夫ですか?
ごめん、ちょっとクラッときて。
But they're not skipping, so it's apparently different. Are we finally on a different route? But Mikimoto was eventually able to make it back to his room under his own power.
じゃあ、気をつけて。
Mikimoto offered us these parting words, then disappeared into his room. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be watching for, but given the situation it seemed fitting advice. Once I heard the click of his door locking, I turned to Mari.
あのさ、
Might cut me off if I could say another word.
まさか私を一人にするつもりじゃないよね。
I was surprised by the question, but also a little relieved.
いや、とんでもない、とんでもないよ。
Mari, seeming comforted by our offer, gave a weary smile. I opened the door to my room and let Mari inside. Are any of these choices real? Game, why do you keep giving me stuff like this? I know your original version was going on 30 years old now, but that's not an excuse. She sat on one of my beds, I perched on the other. Here we go. Right, yep, we're in the same room, we just kind of say some words at each other, we pick the option we didn't take last time. And then we wake up the next morning to hear screaming. Yeah, the case is happening again. Alright, so, let's go see what the hell is going on now. I just have to find Mari as soon as possible. I gathered all my courage and headed for the stairs. This is absolutely not going to change anything. Have they all been so noisy? I creaked my way down the stairway, cringing with every step. Oh, your stairs are squeaky. That's pretty cringe, bro. Properly maintaining and lubricating your staircases are like totally poggers, brah. There was no one in the lounge. I cautiously approached the front door, and turned to look in the drawing room. For a moment my heart stopped in my chest. The door to the cellar, where we had locked up Kayama, was open. The very next instant, my heart started hammering. The voice that came from my throat was faint and strained. It didn't sound like me at all. Had Kayama escaped from the cellar? How on earth had he managed such a trick? Or had someone unlocked the cellar door and ventured downstairs? And if so, why? Just then, I heard loud footsteps behind me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. When I turned, I saw Mari. She came barreling toward me, and nearly fell over as she skidded to a stop. Insert Sonic the Hedgehog skidding sound effect here. She cried out my name with a mixture of surprise and relief.
マリ、一体何があったんだ?
She didn't answer, instead leaping into my waiting arms. I held her trembling body tightly.
どうしたんだよ。さっきの悲鳴はマリか。
おじさんが、おじさんとおばさんが。
Those few words were enough to give me an idea of what had happened, though I hated to even contemplate it. There had been another attack. This time the victims were Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi. Right? I couldn't believe it. Innocent people being killed. One after another. It was all so unthinkable.
小林さんたちまで。
As I asked this in stunned disbelief, Mari could only nod.
一体誰が。
I looked over at the cellar. Kayama. Where was Kayama? Had he escaped from captivity, found Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi, and then... Before anything else, I had to check on Kayama. As I've said, I've gone down this route before in a previous stream, so I'm deliberately picking all the odd answers, just in hopes of something new happening. Before anything else, I had to see if Kayama was still in the cellar.
いいか、離れるんじゃないぞ。
I tilted her face up from my chest and looked into her eyes. Her features were contorted with grief, but I held her gaze until at last she nodded. Then I took her hand, and together we headed to the cellar.
加山さん。
I called his name down the narrow stairway. There was no reply. Step by cautious step, we made our way down beneath the lodge. I kept a firm grasp on Mari's hand as she followed close behind. A bare bulb cast the only light in the chilly wine cellar. What is it with wine cellar and murder mysteries? I mean, really. Second Detective Conan movie, that one episode of the Inspector Akechi case files. Well, we found Kayama. Mission accomplished, kids. Wow, incredible. That right there is why you're the best, boss. There, illuminated by its glow, Kayama lay face down on the floor. His head was wrenched to one side, and his eyes were wide open. A pool of inky blood, maybe a meter wide, was spreading out from beneath his head. Kayama too. All rational thought fled my mind. Dismembered bodies, unseen attackers, Midori beaten to death, Kayama the Kobayashis. Things had moved far beyond the realm of deductions and theorizing. Our only concern now, how would we survive until dawn? Guessing the killer went to the cellar, killed Kayama. Why'd they leave the door open? Maybe Kobayashi witnessed the murder and the murderer went after them and killed them, so they didn't get too close to the cellar. Well, if this is the murder that Kobayashi witnessed, the question of the hour is what would he be doing down there? Kayama was supposed to be locked up down here because we suspected he was the murderer. Kobayashi does have the key, but why would he go down? Unless we figured that out, Mari and I would join the ranks of the dead. He didn't necessarily have to be down here, maybe he saw someone entering the room. That's a possibility. That one thought needed to drive all of our decisions from this point forward. Mari clung to me as she cried. Her eyes were glassy and unfocused.
Mari! Mari! しっかりしろ! しっかりしてなきゃ俺たちも殺されるぞ!
Keep it together, man. I grabbed her by the shoulders and started to shake her. As I did, the light came back to her eyes.
さあ、とにかく上に戻ろう。
Yes, let us leave this place, for it is full of corpses. And the devil's own spirits. I wasn't sure what to do next, but anything was better than staying down here with a dead body. I climbed the stairs, pulling Mari along with me. I don't think the killer will be Toshio, he's nice. I don't think the killer will be Toshio, because Toshio has literally no defense, which means there's nothing to deduce. When we reached the top, I stopped and considered what to do next. Should I check on Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi? Or should I go tell the others, the ones who were still alive anyway, about what we'd found? I had to warn the living first. Haruka in particular needed to hear about this right away. Unless she's the killer, of course. In which case, she'd already know. Still holding Ma's hand, I went upstairs and started banging on everyone's doors.
起きてください起きてください非常事態ですお願いです起きてください
Even under this much pressure, Toru still has that really neat rhythmic knock. I'll start beatboxing over it. There was no response from Mikimoto's or the Kayama's rooms. But one of the other doors cautiously opened a crack. It was the room belonging to the three girls. Kaneka's eyes were darting back and forth between me and Mari. She was still wearing the same clothes as earlier, so she must have been awake this whole time.
また何かあったの？
As I gave a grim nod, Haruko also opened her door and came out into the hallway.
奥さんご主人が
I couldn't find the words. If Mari had done that, she would probably have blood all over her, right? She didn't change clothes. I mean, it occurred over the middle of the night, so... Really, I'm not sure how we would be able to tell if someone had... If we assume this murder was premeditated, which seems likely considering what happened to Tanaka... Do we know when it happened? Not specifically, but it was after we went to bed and before we woke up. So the culprit would have had plenty of time to change, and if this was premeditated, which given what happened to Tanaka seems very likely, then the culprit could easily have prepared an identical set of clothes, specifically to change out. Haruko seemed to guess what had happened in an instant. The blood drained from her face. She stumbled backwards and reached out to the wall for support. I tried to rush over and help her, but she stopped me with an outstretched hand.
大丈夫。大丈夫です。
Everything is gonna be daijobu.
それで、主人はどこで？
If Mari did it, she could stay up until the room when Toru wakes up and have an easy alibi. Well, that's just the thing, though. I need to be the first to find the bodies. Yeah, that is... That is definitely a point. She did scream out, which is why we found it, so... She did very deliberately do that, so Mari's probably not the culprit if we take that approach.
地下室です
She took a few breaths to steady herself, then went downstairs. I'd been afraid she'd faint upon hearing something that happened to her husband. But it appeared she was stronger than I'd given her credit for.
あのおじさんが殺されたの？
Oh, he's super dead. It's fucked. Kaneko asked in a whisper. I don't trust this lady, though. Toru did say if she were the culprit, she would know. She did seem to guess rather quickly, to quote the narrative.
それだけじゃありませんどうもオーナーとその奥さんも
3人も？
There's 3 people. Just like you all. How curious. I heard the 2 other girls gasp behind her.
あなた方3人はずっと起きてたんでしょう何か物音を聞きます
They closed the door in my face. Wow, okay, rude. I just wanted to know if you'd be interested in buying these fine leather jackets like the one I'm wearing. As I listened, I could hear a curious murmuring coming from inside the room, along with sobbing. Saints preserve us! Saints preserve us, Commissioner Gordon. I don't know, I haven't watched the old Batman series in years. It sounded like at least one of the girls was a Christian. I couldn't bring myself to ask them to open the door again. So I seriously doubted any of the girls was the killer. And in the long run, it might be safer for the three of them to shelter a place like this. There was one more person accounted for upstairs. Mikimoto. Why wasn't he coming out? Had he been the one to kill those people? Grappling with such thoughts, I stood at the door to Mikimoto's room.
Mikimoto-san! Mikimoto-san! Inai desu ka?
Dun 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 dun. Like, you hear it, right? I'm not crazy. I banged on his door, even louder than before. Still no reply. Slowly, I reached out for the knob and turned it. To my surprise, it was unlocked. The door opened easily. Had he left his room? No, he hadn't. Mikimoto was in his bed under the covers. What had he been thinking, not locking his door in a situation like this? Was he that confident he wouldn't be killed? Or could he be the...
Mikimoto-san! Okite kudasai! Mikimoto-san!
I approached his bed and began shouting, right into his ear. He didn't move a muscle. Mari gasped. No way. He was dead too? We'd both had the same thought.
そんなことあるわけないよ。疲れてたんだよ、きっと。Mikimoto-san! Mikimoto-san!
Can take off the covers now? I thought we... He was in his bed under the covers. I don't know. I feel like it would be weird. Maybe Mikimoto isn't on the bed. Maybe it's Toshio. And Toshio's... I don't think we've seen Toshio's hands, actually, but I feel like we would have noticed a difference like that. I shook his body beneath the sheets. He felt as stiff as a board.
脈取ってみたら。
バカなこと言うなよ。あれから怪我も何もしてないのに、どうして死ぬんだよ。
As I said this, I gently took hold of the arm poking out from under the covers. I jerked my hand back. He was cold as ice. Mikimoto was dead too? I grabbed his wrist again and frantically searched for a pulse.
やっぱり死んでるのね。
Mari looked like she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I could only nod. Mikimoto's pulse had stopped. And for some reason he only had 3 knuckles. That was really weird. I stood there for a few moments. My mind went blank. If it came down to confronting the killer, Mikimoto was the one person I'd thought I could rely on. Now even he was dead. No, wait. Had he really been murdered?
Mikimoto-san は殺されたんじゃないかもしれない。
Mari looked up at me in surprise.
どういうこと？
三木本さんは頭をひどく殴られてた。もしかするとあの時脳内出血を起こしてたのかもしれない。
Fit the killing for killing everyone who was alone during the night. Kobayashi was probably awake and died because of that. Yeah, that does check out with what we've been theorizing earlier. The culprit killed Tanaka, got snowed in so they couldn't escape, so they killed everybody around to make sure that they would not be reported before they left when it finally did clear up.
そうなると時間が経つにつれて頭の中に血液が溜まって脳を圧迫することになる。放っておいたら死んでしまう。
And yeah, that about the noggin. Because we don't have a choice of whether we want to be in the same room as Mari or not, probably because we would die otherwise. It's quite possible.
じゃあ自然死？
I mean, it's questionable if somebody who was in their room alone would open their door for a stranger, or a near stranger, which could explain why Mrs. Kayama is still alive. Assuming she isn't the killer.
元々の原因は殴られたことだから殺されたことには変わりないけど、他に外傷が見当たらない以上はそう考えるしかないんじゃないかな。
Not that they necessarily have to open the door. How would you murder someone through a closed door? I mean, I can think of, you know, a decent few ways to commit locked room murders, but they all involve getting inside the door ahead of time. Unless the culprit has a long tube and a stash of poison gas on top of all their body chopping devices. Or a master key. Did Kobayashi have a master key? I honestly don't remember. None of this changed the fact that Mikimoto was now dead. But it was easy to imagine him having succumbed to his injuries rather than being brutally slain by the killer. Technically, succumbing to his injuries would also be him being slain by the killer. If there's the master key, I think that's too convenient. I mean, I've read good mystery novels that involve master keys. Really, with any sort of mystery concept, mystery plot, it comes down to execution. I've read incredibly good, unreliable narrator stories, and I've read ones that were just lazy and full of cheats. I've read fantastic needle and thread locked room murders, and I've read ones that didn't make any sense. It's not about your tools, it's about what you build with them. Mari brought her hands to her mouth in sudden horror.
どうかした？
三木本さんはここで死んでる。加山さんもおじさんたちも。じゃあみんなを殺したのはやっぱり。
Toshio was the one left. So he was the killer after all? Which meant the way he'd grieved Midori's death, his murder and rage at Kayama afterwards, it had all been an act? A sham? A dupe? A facade? A trick? A trap? Shenanigans? Nonsense? Hijinks? Chicanery? A little bit of trolling? A little bit of mischief? Unthinkable. Ow, 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 ow. Why do I keep that around? Ugh.
ハルコさん、一人で大丈夫かしら。
Mari worried aloud. This was bad. If Toshio was the killer and he felt like he had nothing left to lose. Aside from me, all the remaining survivors were women. If it came down to a one-on fight with Toshio, I wasn't sure I'd come out on top. Unless we're all stuck together, more people could die. I decided. Alright, we're running out of potential division points, game. Alright. So, let's do something incredibly stupid. I didn't want to look weak of Mari. If she hadn't been watching, I would have run screaming from this place a long time ago. I wasn't a particularly brave guy, and I was certainly no good in a fight. But I didn't want her thinking of me as a coward.
加山さんの奥さんや女の子たちに警告だけはしといた方がいいだろうな。
I said each word deliberately, trying to keep my voice from trembling.
それから小林さんたちの様子も見てこないと。
Yeah, we really put off investigating those bodies, didn't we?
いや、あそこへは行きたくない。
Mari shook her head vehemently. I thought back on that heartening scream I'd heard earlier. Tommy, thank you for the hydrate redeem. There we go. Whatever was in that room, I was sure it was something you'd never want to see again. And to be honest, I wasn't sure I was up for it either.
仕方ないな。マリは女の子たちの部屋に入れてもらって一緒にいればいい。
じゃあ、トール一人で。
Alright, let's break off here and see what changes.
大丈夫。すぐ戻ってくるから。
I tried to be cheerful, but it only ended up making me feel even more anxious. I went up to the girl's door and knocked loudly.
開けてください。お願いします。マリとしばらく一緒にいてやってください。
There was silence on the other side. Just when I was wondering if they would ever let us in, the door slowly opened.
マリさんだけ。
Aki, the girl with the glasses, popped her head out. Her face seemed drawn. I mean, doesn't everyone's faces seem drawn? They are just artistic representations. Who would want to stay with the hive mind? They could all be killers. That would be such a cheap option, though. Like, that would just resolve, like, all the answers. I suppose no, it wouldn't. Tanaka's, like, glass breakage would still have to be a trick, but... Like, 3 people working together could hack up a body in, like, a third of the time? They could all just say, oh, we had alibis, we were all together, when they weren't. Like, at that point, why would you even bother doing a trick to begin with?
ええ。僕は今から下の様子を見てきますから。
ならいいわ。入って。
I'm glad to know you're as enthusiastic about this as I am. With a tiny bow of gratitude, Mari stepped inside. I added one last thing before the door closed again.
トシオさんが来ても絶対ドアを開けないでください。いいですね。
I didn't get a response. That's right, I think the only possible killer is either Mikimoto or the wife of company president whose name I will never recall. She's either Kyoko or Haruko, whichever one Kobayashi's wife isn't. I took a moment to ready myself, and headed for the first floor. I tiptoed past those tulips, down the staircase. That's where I was, holding my breath the entire way. The lodge, which should have been warm and cozy, now seemed like another building entirely. Around the bend of the hallway, in the shadows and corners of the lounge, felt like Toshio could be lying in wait for me anywhere.
奥さん、ハルコさんいますか？
Haruko, that's her name. Maiden name possibly Haruhara or Raharu, but I doubt it severely. I called down to her from the cellar door. I kept looking back over my shoulder, gripped by the unshakable sense that someone was creeping up behind me. Eventually, Haruko made her way up from the cellar. She didn't appear to have been crying, but still she seemed pale, as if she might collapse at any moment. I sighed with relief.
奥さん、無事でしたか。一人じゃ危ないですよ。2階で女の子たちと一緒にいてください。
Haruko didn't seem to hear a word I said. She just passed me by and wandered up the stairs like a ghost. A little worried about her, but I remembered I still needed to check the Kobayashi's room. I picked up a mop from the lounge floor. Then, holding it at the ready, I proceeded into the dining room. As I walked, I wondered if Toshio might be lurking under one of the tables. Suddenly, the cuckoo clock chimed. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. According to my watch, it was now 4:25 a.m. Only a couple more hours until dawn. She probably did something to the body, but we're not going down there to check. What could she do that would, affect the case at this point, though? We've already seen the body, and she didn't stab us when she had the chance. Even though we gave her one on a silver platter. Maybe she's a body eater. I'm still in a dream, body eater. As I continued, past the back entrance, there were 3 more doors. The one at the end of the hall belonged to Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi. I gave their door a gentle push. It opened easily. I let it swing all the way to the wall before stepping inside. Because I was worried someone might be hiding behind the door. The lights were all still on. The Kobayashi's kitchenette and Tatsumi floored living room were bright and cheery. That's not how I describe it. And their dining area was much like what you'd find in any other home. Seeing it like this, you'd never know anything was wrong. And that is some unfortunately placed blood. Hey chat, do you ever feel, not fresh? Kobayashi was there. He sat on the floor, back to the wall and legs splayed out before him. A large kitchen knife protruded sickeningly from his stomach, and a pool of blood formed beneath him. Both of Kobayashi's hands were wrapped around the knife handle. He probably tried to pull it from his gut, but it only ended up looking like he'd committed seppuku. That is clearly a kitchen knife. No, Mondo, it wasn't some random knife he had on him. It was the kitchen knife. Yeah, I suppose that does put a bit of a kibosh. So the killer was either in the kitchen or Kobayashi tried to defend himself with and got overwhelmed. Yep, those are all certainly possibilities. See that second #1 suspect. Yep. Rip that guy. My gorge began to rise. I quickly covered my mouth with my hands. Certain I was going to vomit at any moment, I made a mad dash for the bathroom. Well, if Kobayashi did witness the culprit going down the stairs, then he could have easily... Per document, I got interrupted for several seconds. Interrupted is the wrong word. I could have easily talked about it if I wanted. I just wanted to give you all a chance to, you know, really sit down and soak in the feelings of whatever. Anyway, thinking about it logically, if Kobayashi did witness the culprit going down into the cellar as you initially theorized, it could easily have been a case of the culprit chasing him. Like, the culprit seeing him, like, maybe coming back up from the stairs, then chasing him into the kitchen, grabbing a knife. I mean, you gotta work with what you have at hand. But as soon as I opened the door, something came tumbling out at me. It was a bloody hand. I gave a pathetic shriek of terror. Bright red blood was splashed across the bathroom sink and walls. Kyoko lay on the floor by the doorway, naked, her head resting against the edge of the tub. She was dead. Her sightless eyes stared up at me. No wonder Mari had screamed. Yep. 2 bodies at once. Here lies Mrs. Kyoko. She died as she died. Dead. These were her aunt and uncle, after all. A shock it must have been to discover them here like this. The fact that Mari had been able to maintain her sanity at all after witnessing such a thing. She had reserves of willpower I'd never even begun to suspect. So she was killed by getting pushed over and hitting her head on the tub. It wasn't an accident because she was outside of the tub at the time. Like all the way outside, but that doesn't speak to, like, particularly premeditated. Like, malice aforethought, definitely, but not that far aforethought. The culprit probably didn't bring a weapon. What does that tell us, I wonder? I wanted to get it back to her as soon as possible. Took a few steps backwards. And once the bodies were out of sight, I started running. And I ran so far away. Stealth was no longer an option. How did they open the bathroom, though? Did she hear a fight happening in the kitchen and then came out naked? I mean, maybe. Stealth was no longer an option. Snake. This isn't a sneaking mission. All equipment will be provided to you by the official sources. Evil Colonel Campbell be like. Maybe they broke down the door. If they broke down the door would logically be broken down, though, wouldn't it? You can't unbreak a door. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. As I hurried past the back door, I noticed what looked like blood on the doorknob. Why there? My curiosity compelled me to stop. Amber VT, hello! Oh goodness me, a raid! Hello, Amron! Hello, all raiders! Welcome aboard! My name is Mitsunamado. I am a forensic scientist from the world of mystery novels, diving back into my usual wheelhouse with one of the oldest and most influential mystery games ever made, Kamaitachi no Yoru. Yurtar VT, thank you for following. I am certainly suspicious enough to warrant it. For those of you who've just arrived, we are fairly late in this playthrough. We are starting to run out of living people to suspect. We've just discovered the body of the owner of the lodge we're staying in and his wife, both murdered but in very different ways. Feel free to ask any questions if you're interested, but I would like to keep the stream going if you don't mind. My curiosity compelled me to stop. When I took a closer look, I noticed that not only were there dark bloodstains on the knob, but on the floor as well. I don't think I went outside last time. So, let's see what changes. I mean, if you see a trail of evidence that obviously, you need to follow it, right? You wouldn't be able to call yourself a detective otherwise. I gulped nervously and approached the door. Doing my best to avoid the blood. Step in the blood, don't step in the blood. I took hold of the knob. You please stop talking about the knob, honestly. This is indecent. And turned it. But the door was locked and wouldn't open. In other words, Toshio hadn't gotten out this way. So what was all this then? Hello, what was all this then? Got a license for that there blood guy? Did Toshio just happen to brush against the knob after murdering Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi? No, there was far too much blood for that. The nation shocked by all the blood. Film at 11. Toshio had definitely grabbed this knob with his bloodied hand. I was sure of it. Alright, come on, we gotta stay the path, children. I carefully unlocked the door and nudged it open. Outside, the wind was howling. Snow immediately started blowing into the lodge. Wasn't as noisy as it was last time, though. I guess the weather's clearing up a bit. I recoiled from the storm for a moment, then saw something red out in the snow. Blood. Gasp. The one thing I could have predicted. So much blood. In fact, the freshly fallen snow looked like a shape made with some macabre strawberry syrup. Come on, lick the blood. Lick the blood. You know you want to. You know you want to. Lick the blood. Lick the blood. But whose blood was it? I hope it is not Chris's blood. As I recovered from my initial shock, I pondered that question. If Toshio had killed Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi, he probably would have been covered in blood. Or so I assumed from the state of the bodies. But it wouldn't have been pouring from him like this. Had someone else been attacked then? Maybe even murdered? Or could one of Toshio's victims, Kobayashi, say, have fought back and badly wounded him? Dr. Midori likes references, huh? They're what I do instead of being funny. Alright, come on, stay the course. This is the way to a new ending. I steeled myself and ventured out into the room. Strawberry jar blood. Yes. Just grab a strawberry jam jar and just pour it all over the floor, then just nom 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 nom. Perfectly sanitary, I don't know what you're talking about. I steeled myself and ventured out into the storm. Relying on the light from the open door, I started following the trail of blood. I was wearing only slippers, so my feet seemed to freeze a little more with every step. Oh, it could be tomato sauce. Oh, it could be tomato juice. Oh, maybe the killer is a vampire, we don't know. Yeah, warm, comfy slippers, my left foot. Which is about to freeze off. After a few seconds, however, I'd reached the limits of the door's meager glow. Past here, it would be impossible to follow the blood of the falling snow. I stopped and peered out into the darkness. There in the snowy night, I saw two eyes looking back at me, glinting like those of a beast. The next moment, a shadow looked out at me from the swirling snow, screaming like a banshee. You see, it's funny because this game's official localization that you can't play because they took it off the iOS store was called Banshee's Last Cry. It's probably not an intentional reference, but I think it's funny. And Banshee's Last Cry had the same translator as the original Metal Gear Solid. Man, it's all coming together. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Before I could even raise my mop handle, I was sent toppling back towards the ground. Then, with terrifying strength, something grabbed me by the neck and shoved my head deeper into the snow. The instant I asked this, the vice-like pressure around my throat eased. A surprised voice answered me. Toshio, you had glowing eyes? You were a cat people this whole time? Man, you think you know a guy. It was Toshio. Wasn't he going to kill me? The weight on top of me suddenly vanished. Then I heard a thud as something fell to the ground. I fearfully raised myself up. Toshio was lying there in front of me. His forehead was covered in blood, and his face had gone whiter than the snow itself. I'd thought it likely that Toshio had slaughtered Kayama and the Kobayashis. But wasn't Toshio himself now gravely injured? I wondered if I should run, and in the end I decided to stay put. Right, the injury's on his forehead, so he should have seen the culprit's face. But now they're gonna wiggle their way out of this one. Is this the end for lovable Culprit-kun? When he finally replied, Toshio's voice seemed like mist, ready to dissipate at any moment. As if his efforts of a few moments ago had used up all his remaining strength. Okay, he's just not going to tell us. I see how it is. I pressed Toshio for more information, but my words no longer seemed to reach him. The culprit didn't lock him, so they bunked him on the head. That didn't even work. Mitsu, think your jokes through before you tell them, I mean honestly. Haktin Liadon. Liadon, thank you for following. I'm certainly suspicious enough to warrant it. Sorry, I kinda interrupted Toshio's tragic death scene. Anyway, this is why you do a 3-point sweep before you go into the room, my dude. His breathing grew labored. I crawled over and started screaming right into his face. And now he's going to bleed us. So listen up, boy. A pornography starting your mother will be the second worst thing that happens to you today. Toshio's voice faded away entirely.
敏夫さん、誰なんです？誰がこんなことを？
I grabbed Toshio's snow-covered shoulders and started shaking him. Maybe he was already dead. And even if he was still breathing, he wouldn't survive much longer like this without a doctor. I hauled Toshio's body into the lodge through the back door. I left it open and snow had been piling up inside while I'd been gone. I kept dragging him to the relative warmth of the dining room. Since it was someone Toshio suspected, I think it was Mikimoto. I don't specifically recall Toshio suspecting anyone other than Kayama after we made the accusation, but I suppose that does check out. I kept dragging him to the relative warmth of the dining room, then put my ear to his chest. No matter how long I listened, I couldn't find a heartbeat. Seen in the light, it was clear Toshio's face was that of a dead man. I was confused. I was shocked. I was flabbergasted. I was gobsmacked. I was baffled. Toshio wasn't the killer after all. He said he'd been attacked by someone else. And he said he'd been attacked by the same person who had been responsible for attacking Mr. and Mrs. Kobayashi. So who the hell was it then? Other than Mari and myself, Haruko and the three girls were the only people left alive. All were women and none seemed particularly strong. Could any of them have been capable of attacking the Kobayashis and then overpowering Toshio? It'd be lame if it was only one of the hive mind. Yes. Well, we have a decent few theories here, and neither of them particularly seem to be what we really want to say. I feel like we don't get to know them individually too well. I mean, one of them's kinda slutty, one of them wears glasses, and one of them is allegedly fat. What more do you need to know about a human being? I mean, honestly, Otome, it's like you expect characters to be characters. So, what do we want to say here? I feel like Toshio's last words imply that there was, in fact, only one culprit. So the hive mind theory doesn't really hold up under scrutiny that well. Though for all I know, that it might just have been a mistake in the translation. Maybe if Fighter hates glasses, the one person who wears glasses in the entire cast could be the killer. Yeah, unfortunately, anti-glasses prejudice is a very severe issue in our modern society. For as little as $1 a day, you too can contribute. Getting people with glasses the warm home they deserve. Well, whatever the case might be. Honestly, I don't know if Kayama would be able to overpower him either, but if he did manage to get that surprise from around the corner, it's not like working out will make your skull less prone to breakage. I'm pretty sure that's a thing that doesn't work out, so I do consider Kayama more suspicious of these two binary choices. Yeah? Meh. Maybe the body in Mikimoto's room was actually Tanaka's body. Wasn't Tanaka's body in at least a dozen pieces? mean, that would explain something. I mean, I'm not entirely clear on just how much of the body we looked at under those covers. We saw, quote, a hand sticking out from under the covers. And in the CG, we saw the hand was, like, chopped off, like, a bit below the wrist? Hold on. I'm gonna go recheck the CG. Go back, Here, return to title. If it was his detached hand, we could have noticed it. Yeah, we see here his hand was chopped off about here. I guess if they wiped the blood off... We only see one of his hands, though. 1 hand, 2 feet. I mean, from what we saw during dinner, I'm fairly certain Tanaka did in fact have 2 hands. Wait, how much of the alleged Mikimoto's hand did we see? The alleged Mikimoto's alleged hand. About this much. I guess if the culprit stuffed the rest of that shirt with the arm, it's possible. Of course, the real question of the hour is whether they would have taken the gamble, us not just pulling up the cloth, the blankets, or rechecking Tanaka's room. I guess they would have had us a bit distracted. Anyway, we're not allowed to make that accusation either way, so I think it's Kayama because Toshio did refer to the culprit in singular. So unless anybody has any objections, I think that's the route we're gonna go down. This loop, as it were. Maybe Kayama? I don't think it is Kayama. If we're being honest, I don't think it's either of these options, but those are what's been put in front of us, so... Didn't even realize I'd forgotten to check for Kayama's pulse. I mean, I had never actually touched his body. Maybe he was just pretending to be dead. Could he have been wandering the lodge this whole time, waiting for an opportunity to kill us all? Honestly, no, Kayama's definitely dead. No way, Kayama's definitely dead. Maybe. Okay, come back soon. What those 3 girls have been working together to kill everyone? God, why is it right now? And they could be the killers. We're just gonna go back down this road. Alright, you wanna play it like that. Really just gonna completely force my hand, aren't you? I needed to be sure that Kayama was really dead. Let me stick on, like, the path that isn't the exact opposite of the one I chose, I mean, honestly. I hefted my mop handle once again, then made my way through the dining room, and over to the cellar door. It was still hanging half open, exactly as I'd left it. I took a deep breath, started down the stairwell. We think he might have been able to overpower Toshio because he did judo. Judo is not a martial art that features any sort of striking. Before I was even halfway down, I could see Kayama's body. He was lying at the bottom of the stairs, same as when we first found him. Is it possible Kayama was only pretending? And after killing the Kobayashis and attacking Toshio, he really did go back down to the cellar? I descended the last few steps a bit more warily, then started to circle around Kayama's body. The acrid odor of blood, a scent I'd become all too familiar with, filled the air. A dark liquid pooling beneath Kayama's head was clearly blood. I poked at his body with the tip of my mop handle. No response. It's just a corpse. I knelt down and held his wrist. He was cold. Searched for a pulse, but came up empty. Kayama was definitely dead. How dead was he? Extremely dead. He's not only merely dead, he's really most sincerely dead. He shuffled off this mortal coil and gone to join the bleeding crowd invisible. My sense of relief was fleeting. Kayama was still dead. It hadn't changed since the last time I checked. So then what the hell was going on? Oh, hey Atome, you're back. Welcome back. Kayama is in fact super dead. Was he a zombie? A walking dead? Was he shambling around, killing people when I wasn't looking? If not, I'd have to assume one of the women upstairs was a brutal murderer. Wait. The Walking Dead? I slowly knelt back down and, fighting the urge to vomit, studied Kayama's lifeless face. His eyes were wide open, and his forehead, massive as it was split in two. Let's just look at that thing. I want to draw a tic-tac-toe board. Blood-soaked hair was plastered to his scalp. I put my hand on his chest and searched for a heartbeat. Even through his clothes, I could tell his body had gone cold. There wasn't even the whisper of a heartbeat. Aha! The pieces of the puzzle suddenly came together in my mind. I finally knew who was behind this nightmarish series of murders. It was... I'm gonna save here, this looks like an important bit. Alright, chat, show of hands, how confident do we feel? Are we ready to make our accusation? Or do we want to do one of these obvious joke answers? Maybe not joke answers, but dramatic twists. Alright, who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? Who's it gonna be? It's Mikimoto. Yeah, obviously we've been suspecting Mikimoto for a long time now. The killer is... Mi-ki-mo-to. The killer was Mikimoto. Just then I heard a scream from somewhere in the lodge. Mari? No, that hadn't been her voice. Or so I desperately wanted to leave. I rushed up the stairwell to the first floor. I could hear someone running down the hallway. Had another person been killed? Damn it! If only I had figured things out just a little sooner. As I climbed the stairs to the second story, I could see Haruko, sprawled out on the floor. I quickly scanned the hallway, but there was no one in sight. He had returned to his room. I inched closer to Haruko's body. It was too late. Just one look and I knew she was past saving. Oh no, she's gone cross-eyed. Blood was streaming from her ruined forehead, and her vacant eyes staring off into the void. Now that I knew who the killer was, I wasn't sad or scared as I gazed on her body. Only angry. Yes, angry. No, angry. Anyway, let's go talk to the others. I tightened my grip on the mop handle and opened the door to Mikimoto's room. Mikimoto was lying in bed just as he'd been the last time I saw him.
Mikimoto-san, もう死体のふりはしなくてもいいんですよ。
I closed his door and leaned against it as I spoke. The corpse on the bed didn't move a muscle. Had my guess been wrong after all? Just then.
あと少しだったんだがな。バレちまっちゃしょうがない。
Mikimoto sat up and swung his legs off the bed.
なんでわかったんだ?
Hey, Otome, you did it. Yes. As I've known from the beginning, Mikimoto is in fact the true culprit behind all the murders. Let's see how much he's prepared to share with us on this rather bloody ending.
あなたの手は冷たすぎたんです。ここより寒いところにいた加山さんの手よりも冷たかった。まるで雪か氷をずっと触っていたみたいな冷たさでした。
Yes, I did notice when we first found his alleged body. Toto described his hands as being like completely icy, not just dead body cold. And believe me, I know how a dead body is supposed to feel.
なるほどな。ちょっと冷やしすぎたか。
Mikimoto clicked his tongue, then pulled something out from beneath his clothes. For a nerve-wracking second, I thought he was going to reveal a gun or something. But it turned out to be just a rolled-up towel.
それを使って脈を止めたんですね。
So that's what you used to hide your pulse.
うん、そうだ。
Yep, just tie it off with a tourniquet. If you wedged something in your armpit and squeezed, or that too, you could stop your pulse for a while. That thing all the kids learned after watching Sherlock. Made sense since you were basically cutting off the circulation in your arm. Mikimoto, certain that someone would come to check on him, had cooled his hands in the snow outside his window, then waited with a rolled-up towel under his armpit. We'd seen too much death that night. As a result, there hadn't been time to properly examine each and every corpse. And so, we'd failed to see through a ruse as simple as this. If we'd picked up on it earlier, Haruka would still be alive right now.
なんでこんなひどいことをしたんだ。みんな何の罪もない人たちだったのに。
I couldn't control my anger any longer. I started shouting at Mikimoto.
人間ほど罪深い生き物はいないさ。たくさんの命を奪って生き延びてるんだからな。
Even if you freeze your own hands, wouldn't you get frustrated of some sort? I mean, not like if you did it for a long time. I mean, he just, like, you know, cracked the window a bit, shoved his hand in the snow, like, right before he came out. I mean, come on, like, even you've done that, I imagine. More importantly, look, revealing that he was caught his irises to shrink to a third of their usual size. Maybe if we manage to get him to turn good and atone for his crimes honestly, then he'll turn back around and they'll grow. And out at Spur Lodge, they still say Mikimoto's small eyes grew 3 sizes that day. But given the way he's talking, I kind of doubt we're actually going to be able to pull that off.
そんなのはただの詭弁だ。なぜみんなを殺したんだ。加山さん、小林さんや敏夫さん、緑さん、それに田中さん。
You. I don't have time for your philosophy, damn it, I'm already in college. Why are you wearing that stupid beard?
田中? そんな奴を殺した覚えはないね。まあ、ある意味では殺したと言えなくもないが。
That's an interesting series of words you just said. I sure hope you don't explain it this ending, so we have to keep digging around. I didn't understand a word he was saying.
しかし、なぜ一人でここへ来たんだ？みすみす殺されに来たようなもんじゃないか。
Yes, interesting. He seems to go off on a tangent. He wasn't alone though. Tanaka was pretty alone as far as I could see. Sat in the corner, didn't talk to anybody, went straight to his room after dinner. He didn't even talk to us in the route where we specifically approached him and said hello. Oh geez, I was thinking of the president. Yeah, you were. Tanaka was the guy with the shades and the hat and the popped collar, who looks like either a yakuza or a private investigator, depending on who you ask. And now he looks like a pile of body parts. There's one thing that doesn't seem to make sense to me, though. What might that be, Otame? Though he didn't look armed, Mikimoto was acting with all the confidence of a man who was.
残ってるのは女の子ばかりだ。危ない目に遭わすわけにはいかないじゃないか。
はあ、一発のヒーロー気取りか。命は大事にした方がいいぞ。と言ってももう手遅れか。
When we found Toshio almost dead, he said that he always knew it was him. But if he always knew or suspected Mikimoto, why did he conduct that whole trial thing just to steer the discussion towards suspecting the company president? Makes no sense. I don't really remember all that clearly what Toshio and Mikimoto's relationship was like, but I think he was probably exaggerating when he said always. Like, I mean, he didn't suspect Kayama until we brought up the idea. He was very angry and very hot-headed. He was lashing out. I brandished my mop handle at him. Maybe Toshio was a dummy. I mean, I thought we knew that already. I mean, you see how big that guy's biceps was? He was a total himbo. But Mikimoto, seemingly unconcerned, kept slowly walking towards me. I retreated from his strange, murderous advance. Oh god, he's doing the Mike Myers walk. He's absolutely about to destroy us. My back slammed up against the door, which for some reason I'd closed behind me. As I groped for the knob, Mikimoto mocked me.
逃げるのか？逃げて女に助けを求めるか？
I mean, yes, actually, that was exactly my plan. It was no good. He had me dead to rights. As Mikimoto continued to close in, I gave a wild shout and launched myself at him. He easily dodged a blow from my mop handle. Next thing I knew, he slipped behind me and got in his arms around my neck. There was now a switchblade in his hand. Where the hell did that come from? If you had those the whole time, why'd you keep pushing people over and stabbing them with kitchen knives, huh? It feels lazy. Honestly. You call yourself a murderer.
残念だったな。終わりだ。
I felt his knife against my throat.
トール
As I heard Mari's voice, there was a loud thud, and Mikimoto suddenly staggered. Once I got over my surprise, I grabbed his hand and tried to twist the switchblade away from him. Mikimoto grunted and dropped the knife, then wrenched my hands back in the opposite direction and shoved me down to the bed. Mikimoto-san, no, Yamate! Mari's the real MVP, though. The next thing I knew, his hands were around my throat, choking me. Okay, not on a first date. Those are some unfortunate noises. I couldn't breathe. It felt like Mikimoto's fingers tearing holes through my windpipe. A white spot appeared in the center of my vision, growing bigger and bigger, and suddenly, the weight leading me to the bed vanished. I gasped for air as a wave of nausea washed over me. When I opened my eyes, I saw Mari standing in the open doorway. She was staring down at her bloody hands in shock. As soon as she noticed my gaze, she came rushing over towards me.
トール、大丈夫？
I still couldn't speak, so I just nodded.
よかった。私、トールも殺されちゃったのかと思った。
I was only mostly dead, and only mostly dead is still a little bit alive. She sobbed and threw her arms around my neck. Mari had stabbed Mikimoto to save my life. Seeing her covered in blood like that, I was ashamed to admit the sight had spooked me for an instant. If it hadn't been for Mari, I'd be dead. Then Mikimoto probably would have killed her. And all the 3 girls as well. I looked down, and saw Mikimoto lying motionless on the floor. The switchblade was buried in his back up to the hilt. Testament to the force Mari had put behind the blow. The knife must have pierced straight through to his heart. If indeed he had one. Compared to the murders Mikimoto had committed that night, the amount of blood spilled here seemed shockingly small. As if his body didn't contain as much blood as a regular human's. But it was actually probably just because the knife was plugging the wound. Why had he committed such horrible crimes? And how had he managed to kill Tanaka even though there was no possible way he could have done so? With Mikimoto dead, there was no one left to answer such questions. Regardless, for now, Mari and I were content to hold one another until the morning's light. Our long nightmare had finally come to an end. There's an ending. But it can't be the true ending, obviously. There were far too many unanswered questions left. So, there we have it. So, Dr. Midori, you did say you already knew the culprit. Do you know the whys and the answers to every question? I have a vague idea as to the why. And I know how he got Tanaka, which is the question, the biggest, physical answer question we get. I do not know, the answer to, every single murder he committed, but, realistically speaking, Tanaka's murder was the only one that really featured, I guess what you'd call a trick? So I guess, Mikimoto got up, Mikimoto went to location A, went to the crime scene, Mikimoto killed the victim. That's the answer to all of the questions after, you'll say in English, Tanaka. So I'm curious, does anyone have any thoughts on Tanaka's mystery? Guess we might as well spend the rest of our stream time tracking down these remaining branches and seeing if we can grab anything. One person couldn't do it alone. More than one? I'll just discuss the case thus far. Because as Toru said, we still have no idea what the motive was. And again, we still have no idea. Maybe he was killed right after dinner time. The thing is, though, we heard Mikimoto's car roll up. Not sure about the window shattering trick. Honestly, the window shattering trick is probably the easiest option here. If you'll recall, we heard Mikimoto's car roll up after dinner. Then he stepped in, said hello, went up into the room, like just was there for like a few minutes to drop his stuff off, then came down and was there together with us until we heard the sound of the window breaking. So the question of the hour is, how did he find the time to hack up an entire human body? But enough of that. One person couldn't do it alone, but more than one? A horrible thought suddenly occurred to me. What if those 3 girls had been working together to kill everyone? Oh my god. This is a non sequitur! Mari's with them right now, and they could be the killers. I raced through the dining room and up the stairs, over the river and through the woods. I must have reached the girl's room in seconds flat.
Mari! Akete!
I pounded on the door while shouting Mari's name. A brief debate ensued inside the room, after which the door finally opened. Mari leapt out into the hallway and threw her arms around my neck. That's exactly what I'd wanted to say to her.
Kayama-sanの奥さんは?
That scared me for a moment. Yeah, human affection is truly the scariest thing in the world. The 3 girls were staring at me, but I studiously avoided meeting their gazes.
来なかったけど。
そうか。じゃあ、僕たちは部屋に戻ろう。
I left the girls' room, dragging Mari along by the hand.
でも、一緒にいた方が安全なんじゃないの?
Ignoring her question, I quietly pulled her inside my room.
ねえ、どうしたのよ? さっきはみんな一緒にいた方がいいって。
I shut my door and brought a finger to her lips to silence her.
さっきとは事情が変わったんだ。いいかい? よく聞けよ。みんなを殺したのはトシオさんじゃなかった。ト
シオさんじゃなかった?
Toshio is our friend. He can't kill people, that's illegal. I nodded.
トシオさんは、トシオさんもやられてたんだ。殴られてて、僕が見つけた時はまだ息があったんだけど。
I shook my head, unable to continue.
一体誰にやられたの?
あの3人娘さん、それ以外考えられない。
I looked baffled for a moment, then began to laugh.
あの人たちが人殺しだってそういうの?
I am serious, and don't call me seriously.
信じられないのはわかるけど、他に考えようがないだろう。あの加山さんの奥さんが一人でこんなことができたと思うかい?
そうは思わないけど。
Yeah, she's like old and stuff. Old people can't be murderers.
だろ? だとすると、あの3人以外考えられないじゃないか。もう誰もいないんだよ。みんな死んだんだ。もうみんな殺されたんだよ。
Everyone is dead. I was shouting by this point. My face was filled with something between fear and sadness.
そんなこと信じられない。
僕だって信じたくなんかないさ。もう信じるしかないんだよ。現実を見つめるんだ。
We need to face facts, and the facts is this person who we know isn't the culprit is the culprit. Weebatome has redeemed a stretch and a hydrate. Thank you very much. I will take the hydrate first because my throat feels kind of dry. Cheers, everybody. Alright, there's that. And... oh god, everything hurts so bad. Oof. Right at the 2-hour mark, too. Good timing. Chad, is it normal to have your shoulders burn every time you raise your arms? Anyway, where are we going about? Oh, right, falsely accusing multiple people. For a while, Mommy pressed her face against my chest, sobbing. At the fear of having been betrayed by somebody she was clearly so close to. Then she started to speak again, in a silent voice.
本当にみんな死んじゃったの？トシオさんも、おじさんたちも、加山さんも？
What if we can just say no and then it turns out that this entire setup was actually her surprise birthday party? And that would be like... or maybe it was supposed to be her birthday party, but it all just kind of got out of hand. I mean, anything is possible, right? Right? Right, chat? If she was a huge mystery fan, that could be an awesome birthday party, or a good prize to get if you go on Ellen. Hey there, Mitsuda, we heard you're a huge fan of mysteries, so we got you. Oh, Ellen, you shouldn't have. And then gunshots ring out.
おじさんたちや加山さんの死体はマリも見ただろう。トシオさんも胸に耳を当ててみたけど。
Wouldn't you like this kind of surprise, Dr. Midoi? Tome, I live in the world history novels are set in. This kind of surprise happens to me like 3 times a day. Sometimes 4 during Golden Week. Just as I finished saying that, the lights in the room went out. Oh hey, Tome, it's that thing you predicted would happen. Kya? Mari shrieked and clung to me with all her might. Can't believe Mari was actually the second holder of One for All, or All for One for All. Yeah, that was it. I've totally seen the anime. I tried to pretend everything was fine, but I couldn't keep myself from stammering. All I could see in front of me was total darkness. It was as if the world had been painted black. I couldn't even see Mari's face, even though she was close enough for me to hear her breathing.
そのうち治るだろう。どうせもうすぐ朝だし。
In another few hours, the sun will rise. I swallowed my fear and tried to say something comforting. As time went on, my eyes adjusted to the darkness. I could make out the windows, the contours of the room. My silhouette there beside me. Without letting go of each other's hands, we managed to make our way to the bed.
じっとしてるんだ。じっとしてれば大丈夫だ。
Did you remember to lock your door? I kept repeating it, trying to convince myself of that fact. Little by little, our panic subsided. Until we heard the sound of a door opening, then screams out in the hallway. They were a woman's, but I couldn't tell whose. First, the screams, the dull thud of some sort of impact, followed by the sound of someone falling to the floor. No. Oh god, no. That's gonna be a problem. Mari spoke in a fearful whisper.
加山さんの。
And there she goes. That's right. I've been so busy worrying about the two of us that I'd forgotten about Haruko. If I rushed out there now, I still might be able to help her. My mind was willing, but my body was paralyzed by fear and refused to move. Right now, were those 3 girls out in the hallway, beating Haruko to death, grinning and giggling as they slaked their bloodlust? There were no more footsteps, but I heard the sound of a door opening and closing somewhere else in the building. Eventually, silence returned to the lodge. A silence so deep, it felt as if everyone in the world lay dead.
トール、様子見てきてよ。
Should I, though? Should I really? We sat here and giggling about it's all in Toru's head. Yeah, it turns out the entire game is in Toru's head. He's actually been in a coma for the last year. Mari was on the verge of tears. I gulped. Nervously. Maybe she was still alive. Just like Toshio. There wasn't much I could do if she was, but that would be cowardly. Just in case the girls were lying out in wait in the hallway. I crept over to my door, pressed my ear against the wood, and tried to listen for any noises on the other side. Nothing. Not the rustling of clothes. Not even the whisper of a breath. I cautiously put my hand on the knob and gave it a slow turn. Ever so carefully, I opened the door, bracing myself behind it so no one could push their way in. I poked my head out to take a look. I was totally expecting him to be whacked immediately, and there I saw it. We'd been transported to Silent Hill, oh god. A figure that looked like Haruko's sprawled out on the hallway floor. It was too dark to tell for sure, but she didn't seem to be moving. I quickly closed and locked the door, and looked back at Mari.
ダメだ。やっぱりやられてる。
Probably could have figured that without having to look. Mari covered her mouth and began to cry. Forgetting all about muffling my footsteps, I ran to the bed and put my arm around her. Her slim shoulders convulsed with each sob. I thought if I could somehow stop those tremors, then her crying would stop as well. So I held her with all my might. Yeah, they could have run outside. Where would they go, though? Still a blizzard going on. The cars would all get stuck in the snow.
どうしてなの？みんないい人たちだったのに、どうして？
It's because the crimes man keeps doing crimes. We need to make the crimes man stop criming everywhere. I didn't know the answer to that myself.
マリ、冷静になるんだ。冷静にならなきゃ、僕たちも殺される。僕たち。
あの人たちに殺されるっていうの？私にはやっぱり信じられない。ここには何か悪霊みたいなものがいるのよ。そうでなきゃ狂った殺人鬼が。人間が、普通の人間がこんなひどいことできるはずがないわ。
An evil spirit. Oh yes, it is, sir. I didn't want to admit the existence of such a being. But I was just as loath to admit those 3 girls could be out there committing murder after murder. Just then, Mari said something outrageous.
あの子たちを助けに行かなくちゃ。
ちょっと待てよ。みすみす殺されに行くようなもんじゃないか。一歩も外へ出ちゃダメだ。
Mikimoto could go home. He doesn't have to kill absolutely everyone. I mean, there's a shortage of suspects. I really do think the best way he'd have to get away with it would be to, realistically speaking, would be to kill everyone and then just leave when the snow comes down without admitting that he's the guy we're looking for. Mikimoto is probably a fit name anyway. Well, like, you think we would all just let him leave before we found the police arrive? Like, almost everyone in this lodge is stupid, but they're not that stupid. I frantically grabbed for Mari as she got up and tried to leave.
じゃあトールはあの子たちを見殺しにするっていうの？
Yes, thank you for your service in murdering my uncle, Mr. Mikimoto. I'm sure the nation will remember you forever.
そうじゃないよ。あいつらが犯人だったらどうするんだって言ってるんだよ。
As I shouted this at her, a thought suddenly occurred to me. Killers. I'd said killers just now, not killer. Of course. Plural, rather than singular. That's what happens when you put an S on the end of a word. A caboose goes on the end of a train. Mr. Kobayashi was a train conductor before he was a monk, before he was a cellarman, before he was a lodger. The culprit is Kobayashi, I've got it. The perfect crime.
どうかしたの？
敏夫さんは息を引き取る間際にあいつにやられたって言ったんだ。
Hey, I noticed the thing. I have a big brain. It's almost like I've done this before or something. Mari took a moment to process my words, and suddenly stood up.
そうよ。やっぱりあの人たちは犯人じゃないのよ。早く助けに行かなきゃ。
We have to go help
おい待て
them.
よ。外に出たら危ないよ。彼女たちだって3人もいるんだから外へ出なければ安全さ。
It's not like Mikimoto's carrying like a machine gun under his clothes or anything.
そんなのわからないじゃない。女の子ばかりなのよ。私たちだけ助かればそれでいいの？もう人が殺されるのを見るのは嫌。見殺しになんてできない。
I felt the same way, and I'd been trying my hardest to avert tragedy all night long. Chat, do you ever get a feeling of deja vu, the feeling that you're re-experiencing something you've experienced before? Probably not, because I don't think any of you were in chat, but I recognize this text box. More than anything, I wanted to keep Mari from this horrible fate, no matter the cost. Cue the touch. You got the touch. Can I see this before?
嫌よ。止めな。
They're not letting me skip, so this should be a new scene at least. I shoved me away and tried to open the
分
door.
かった。僕が行くから。マリはここで鍵をかけてじっとしてると約束してくれ。僕がどんなに遅くなっても絶対にここから出ないって。
Mari seemed to wrestle with the matter briefly, but she agreed to my terms in the end.
分かった。約束するわ。でも早く帰ってきてね。それから。気をつけて。
Yachiko died now. I know you're definitely on the path to a bad ending. Mop handle at the ready. I cautiously opened the door and crept out a darkened hall. I turned and nodded to Mari, closed the door behind me. Then I heard the sturdy click of the lock being engaged. There were windows here and there, it was still much darker out here than in my room. I crept my way over to the girl's door. You know, this thought hadn't occurred to me until now for some reason, but why is the camera, like, on the floor? Is Toru actually this short? Is this a true-to-life vision of what we're supposed to be seeing? My mouth had gone bone dry, and my heart was running riot. I was ashamed of myself for being so frightened. Dr. Midori, do you think we'll have enough time to start another playthrough today? Probably not. Well, another play. Hey, it depends on how. It depends on how much longer this stream takes. I do plan on like wrapping up within the hour. I do have other stuff to do. I stopped a moment to put my ear up against their door. Nothing but silence from inside. Was it possible that the girls didn't have anything to do with this, just as Mari had said? In that case, there was a crazy serial killer on the loose, like Jason Friday the 13th, definitely know that line. I didn't know which was more terrifying. Copyright infringements? Or the hive mind? Unsure of how to proceed, I ended up knocking. If you wish to enter, you must answer our questions 3. After a few moments, I received a faint whisper in reply.
僕です。トールです。
Kanako's panicked scream echoed through the darkened hallway. When I heard their trembling voices, I knew they couldn't possibly be murderers. It was the exact same trembling voice they'd been speaking in literally the entire game, so I don't know why this is what clinched it for me.
怖がらないで。さっき廊下で加山さんの奥さんが襲われたみたいなんだ。残っているのは君たちと僕。それにマリだけだ。
And nobody else.
全員で立ち向かわなきゃみんなやられてしまう。団結しろ。どっちかの部屋で一緒になるんだ。
いやよ、誰がそんな言葉に騙されるもんですか。
They seemed to think I was the killer. And of course they did. I'd been suspecting them as well. I tried to think of a way to clear away their doubts, but I soon gave up.
じゃあ、そのままで聞いてください。誰かが来ても、絶対にドアを開けちゃダメですよ。僕とマリはあっちの部屋にいますから、危険だと思ったら、すぐに大声を上げてください。
I wonder how much time they could last locked up in their rooms with no food or water. 3 days with no water. Maybe as long as 3 weeks if they manage to, like, live off of snow? Of course, that would be extremely doity. That's when I heard a scream. From behind me. Mother! I turned but didn't see anything moving there in the darkness. I heard Kanako's voice from behind the door, but I didn't bother to answer. Instead, I started running.
Mari!
I hurried through the darkness to my room, almost bumping into a wall in the process. I stopped and stared at my door. It was slightly ajar. It's kind of zen if you think about it. Time is but a moment. Reality is an illusion. The door is ajar. Why was the door ajar? You are asking the wrong questions, young grasshopper. Wait. I was afraid to go inside.
Mari.
Answer me, Bobby. But there was no sound from inside the room. I pushed the door open with the tip of my mop handle. It was slightly brighter than in the room than the hallway. But still not bright enough to see Mari. What had happened to her? She must have found a mouse or a cockroach or something. I desperately tried to convince myself of that.
Mari!
I shouted her name at the top of my lungs, but there was still no reply. My knees were buckling. I could barely stand. Step by cautious step, I made my way inside the room. I could vaguely make out the silhouette of a person lying on the bed. Oh, did you open the door already? We did open the door. We pushed it open. We're inside now. Was that Mari? No. I staggered over to the bed and reached out to the motionless shadow. By the time I realized someone was behind me, it was already too late. I turned just in time to see something swinging down through the darkness at me. A flash of light exploded in my head. In my final moments, as I collapsed to the ground, I was shocked to see my attacker was none other than... And then he died. Man, I can't believe Toru Kamaitachi no Yoru is really dead. Alright, there's that branch on the flowchart cleared. How did he get in there, anyway? Alright, this will just take us back around this way again. Just go down the road just to get that little tick on our log complete. 6 out of 47 endings. 20% of the game scene. 96 branches and only 20% of the game. This is a massive title, chat. But now then, now we know who the killer is. Obviously the one who committed the crime was me. It was me. Me? Okay, enough fooling around already. I knew perfectly well I hadn't murdered anyone, Mitsu. Don't try to be cute, you little shit. It doesn't fit you. I'd like recommendation for a murder mystery work featuring a female main character detective, preferably a story you liked or enjoyed, though. Okay, are we back? Are we back? Everything good? Okay, great, fantastic. Otome, I would like to ask one follow-up question before I give my answer. Do you generally prefer short stories or full-length novels? Because I can think of at least one answer for both of those options. I don't care, I'll do either. Okay, then I'll give you the one I read more recently. Let me just Google this title real quick so I can be sure I'll give you... Yes, I was going to give you the wrong title. Okay. Second, I will paste this into chat so that you can see the spelling. It's not what I just copy-pasted. My recommended title is this. Hoax Ladies by Edward D. Hoke. Edward D. Hoke was, hands down, no competition, the most prolific mystery writer who ever lived. His primary bread and butter was short stories, and he wrote literally thousands of them across a, 70, 80-something year career spread across dozens of different series. Hoax Ladies is, as the title would suggest, a collection dedicated entirely to stories about female detectives. Sure, the doctor made a good recommendation. A female writer. Well, if you wanted that, you should have said so. Could do a follow-up if it would make you feel better. Hold on, let me just Google around. Don't want to get anything wrong. Let's see, I can think of two things I could put in here. Which one do I want? Right, my gut says this would probably be a better option. First novel with a certain amount of attention. And that's a ridiculous name. Okay, yeah, I think this is... Alright. Here's a follow-up. Just because I'm feeling generous and because I'm pretty sure you're the first person who ever actually redeemed this. How did that wind up there? That's curious. Man, keyboards are really confusing. Anyway, the Cordelia Gray series by Phyllis James is a series of more proper full-length mysteries. It's a more period story, not all the way back in the Golden Age, but first story was released in 1972. Originally came out... Or no, not came out. I originally heard of it because it was highlighted as one of Gosho Yama's recommended mysteries in Detective Conan fairly early on, all the way back in Volume 14. I mean, I trust Gosho Yama with my life. Gray is a private investigator. We're looking at a much more conventional... story. She's stoic, she's focused. Are you quite finished? My god. Good heavens above. We should probably pick this back up before they decide to just go out completely. Anyway, Tori was very mad at me for trying to be cute. Says it doesn't suit me, whatever. The killer was... obviously Mari. Mari. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. But I had to confront reality. With a heavy heart, I climbed the stairs to the second floor and approached the girls' room. The door was open. Somehow I wasn't surprised. Kanako was lying on her back in one of the beds. There was no blood, but her neck was bent at a strange angle. Its skin folds. Naki, meanwhile, seemed to be leaning against the wall. All that was dripping with wet. As if someone had smashed a melon against it. And Keiko, her upper torso jutted through the room's window, as if she tried to escape by diving through the glass. Her back was covered in blood, and her clothes had been torn to shreds. It looked like she had been stabbed to death with a knife or something. It was horrifying. The music was completely appropriate for the scenario. As a knife or something. I didn't feel a thing. I simply turned on my heel and went back to my room. I opened the door and peeked inside, but there was no one there. I turned just in time to see Mari emerging from her room. For a moment she seemed startled to see me, and she immediately smiled with relief. It was meant to be a joke, like, oh, she was too fat to make it through the window. I highly doubt that was it. I mean, credit where it's due, the game may have introduced him with some very terrible jokes, but they do seem to have stopped that after things got serious. I noticed with some concern that she was holding her right hand behind her back. Behind her back. Behind her back. Behind her back. Lazy, lazy bums. She seemed genuinely happy as she came closer to me. When she was just 2 steps away, she abruptly sped up and leapt at me. Even me? You're going to kill me too, Mari? I squeezed my eyes shut and swung my mop handle down at her. A disgusting sensation traveled up the mop handle, followed by the sound of something falling. When I opened my eyes, Mari was down on the ground, clutching at her face. I dropped the mop handle, horrified by what I'd just done.
Mari, 大丈夫か?
I knelt on the floor and came close to her. Bright red blood was streaming from between her fingers.
僕が聞きたいよ。マリ、どうして人殺しなんか。
Just then, I spotted something on the ground behind Mari. A necklace with a crucifix pendant. She must have gone back to her room to get it. I'd assumed she'd been hiding a knife or something behind her back. But she hadn't been attacking me after all. She'd only wanted to hug me. And in response, I'd...
マリ、許してくれ。君がみんなを殺したと思ったんだ。マリ、しっかりしてくれ。
Mari slowly removed her hand from her face and looked up at me. She removed her face would be a completely different sentence. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but in those final moments she seemed to be smiling. Then her eyes rolled back in her head.
Mari!
This is some vintage corpse party, like, corpse art. Just look at all that blood. I'd killed Mari. I'd killed her. This had to be a dream. No, a nightmare. When I woke up, I'd be lying in bed and Mari would be banging on the door.
早く起きないと朝食に遅れるわよ。
How she'd holler. I'd practice on the slopes with Mari until I was exhausted, then return home having become a slightly better skier. After winter break, college would start again, and Mari and I would officially become a couple. Then a few years after graduation, we'd get married, and could I be crying when I was thinking of something so wonderful? This was all just a dream. There was nothing to be sad about. Once I woke up, Mari and I would continue on with our fun ski getaway. It wasn't until a shadow fell across my field of vision that I realized someone was standing right in front of me. Slowly, I looked up. But through my haze of tears, all I could see was a blurry silhouette. Is that a security camera up there? Ow. Ah, God, blood, so much blood in my eyes. Everything is gone dark. Biblov. I know what you did. There was no reply. I heard the sound of something slicing through the air, and a sudden jolt. From my brain, all the way down to my toes. You know, once I stretched my back so hard that I felt a sudden shock all the way from my head to my toes. It's real freaky. For a second there, I thought I died. Fortunately, I hadn't. Alright, Midori, have your leg? You have no legs? Such things are just for decoration anyway. Those higher-ups at the tech department don't know what they're talking about. My world went spinning, and darkness overtook me. The end of my dream. Now I could finally escape this nightmare. Mari. Mari. Hurry up and wake me. Hurry. I like this tone, this sounds like it could be the opening, like, title screen theme. To a less overtly horror-focused, or maybe not even less overtly horror-focused, just more mysterious. Now, do you like audiobooks at all? Do you think reading is better? I have absolutely nothing against audiobooks, but I generally prefer physical reading because I can read very quickly, so it generally takes me less time. But audiobooks work very well for lots of people, and that's only a good thing. Alright, that's the end of all the potential. Look, we got mopped up. You must have quite the library. More respectable than some, I would imagine. Do you have any writing projects? I freelance occasionally. It's nowhere near stable. Or do you mean like just independent novel writing? Cause funny story, I actually had a project I was working on like every day for a month. I was incredibly passionate about it. But then one day my computer ate and I wasn't able to recover any of my progress. And then I just kinda lost all drive. It'd be fun to read some of your mystery stories. Oh, they weren't mystery stories, at least not original ones. Yeah, not to be rude, but if I had it made to, like, write original mystery stories of the quality I'm looking at, I would not be slumming it out here with you all. Well, whatever the case. That's the end of all the paths we could have taken. What genre did you like to write? I was writing fanfic. This was a while back. This is when I was still in school. Yeah, I was working on... Okay, so tell me, are you familiar with the anime Monthly Goes Nozaki-kun? Anyway, as we wait for a response to that... I think so. Well, for the 10th anniversary of that series, the original mangaka... Side note, the original manga is still going on. It's really great. You should go read it. The original mangaka created an ARG about an AU where instead of being a mangaka, Nozaki was a private investigator. And I liked that idea a lot, and I was upset that it ended after that one event. So I was starting work on a fanfiction about... God, my throat just got really dry all of a sudden. Excuse me one second, I'm gonna take an illegal hydrate. There we go. Work about, like, the further adventures of that little circle. But like I said, my computer just, I just lost it all one day and I just couldn't find the will to get back to it. Anyway, we've got about half an hour left before I want to stop. Curious. The killer is, I'm curious how many, like, special answers they give here. Or they'll recognize, rather. Like, what could we put in here? Toshio didn't die instantly, so what would happen if we put in the killer's Toshio? Toshio. No, it couldn't be him. Toshio was unmistakably dead. Okay, so I have a choice but to assume that the three girls... Okay. He didn't die instantly, but you know, whatever helps you sleep at night. What about... Haruko? Killer's Haruko. Could she have done it all by herself, though? Probably not. Perhaps she and her husband were in on it together. Right up until she'd pushed Kayama down the cellar stairs and killed him. A petite woman like herself could have done that. I decided to hurry back upstairs. I just reached the first floor when I heard a scream. It was coming from upstairs. I grabbed my mop handle and hurried up to the second floor. When I reached the door to the girls' room, I gave a light knock. There was a whispered reply. Mari.
僕だ開けてくれ敏夫さんももう外で誰かにやられて
A brief debate ensued inside the room. After the door finally opened, Mari leaped out into the hallway, threw her arms around my neck. She'd been worried about me.
加山さんの奥さんは
I stepped in and closed the door.
来なかったけど
The three girls were inside, staying close together. So that scream earlier was...
マリ誰か部屋の外へ出たか
ううん出ないわよ
No one's left. It's almost like this answer's wrong or something. Interesting. The only person who wasn't here was Haruko, which meant Haruko must be the killer. So then who the hell had screamed just now? Was it possible the killer was some unknown person? And they'd attacked Haruko? I didn't know. I was just going in circles. Suddenly I realized the three people at the far end of the room were huddled close together, looking at me with open hostility.
どうしたんですか怖い顔して。
とぼけないで。
Okay, here's the other shoe dropping. Aki shouted at me, her eyes blazing.
さっきの悲鳴、私たちだってちゃんと聞いたんですからね。もう騙されないわよ。
ちょっと待ってよ。まさか僕が春子さんを殺したとでも。冗談じゃない。
Sadly, no. I am not kidding.
だってもうあなた以外誰も残ってないじゃないの。敏夫さんも加山さんも死んだってそう言わなかった？
それは確かにそうだけど、マリ、なんとか言ってくれよ。
When I turned to Mari for assistance, I saw a strange expression on her face.
マリ、まさか僕のことを。
トールが人殺しだなんて思ってないわ。でも悲鳴が聞こえた時、私たちはみんなここにいたし。
I couldn't bear to have Mari doubt me like this. So I told her about my theory.
聞いてくれ。僕は犯人は加山夫妻だったと思うんだ。二人が共犯ならたくさんの殺人も難しくなかった。そして最後に春子さんが加山さんを階段の上から突き落としたんだ。どうだい、辻褄が合うだろ。
じゃあさっきの悲鳴は。
Aki seemed suspicious.
もちろん春子さんの芝居だよ。自分も襲われたと思わせて誰かをおびき寄せようって魂胆だ。
Girls looked at one another, considering my words.
もしそうじゃなかったら春子さんを見殺しにすることになるのよ。
Mari's voice was reproachful.
それはでもそんなことはありえないよ。他に誰もいないんだよ。芝居に決まってるじゃないか。
Whether the Haruko is in fact suspicious.
本当は僕のこと疑ってるんじゃないのか。
At least that's what I wanted to say. But it did.
それにもし誰かもう一人いて春子さんを襲ったんだとしたら、どっちみちもう手遅れに決まってるよ。
You're too late, Gadget. Even as the word left my lips, I realized what a blunder I'd made. Mari's expression changed completely.
トールがそんなに冷たい人だとは思わなかったわ。もういい。私一人で見てくるわ。
待てよ、何言ってるんだよ。そんな危ないことさせるわけにはいかないよ。
Mari ignored my protests, however, and brushed my hand away as she started to leave.
ほっといてよ。私の勝手でしょ。
She threw open the door and ran into the hallway. I immediately chased after her. When she arrived in front of the Kayama's room, she started pounding on the door.
奥さん、加山さん、大丈夫ですか？
There was little point in arguing now. I stood beside Mari and turned the knob. But it seemed to be locked. It wouldn't open.
ダメだマリ、開かないよ。
下から鍵を取ってきてよ。
Mari looked heartsick. I felt she was suffocating inside, but I didn't dare say anything.
分かったよ。マリは部屋に戻ってるんだ。
She wavered for a moment, I eventually convinced her to return to the girl's room. After watching her step inside and close the door, I headed downstairs. I looked for the room key at the front desk, but I didn't know which was the right one. It's probably some sort of magic key, but Kobayashi probably kept that on his person. While I considered whether I should go to his room to look for it, the lights went out. Upstairs, the girls screamed. Haruko's safety was no longer my main concern. I wanted to get back to Mari as quickly as possible. But with the sudden blackout, I'd lost all sense of direction. I didn't know which way was which anymore. A horrible anxiety settled over me. What if the killer had orchestrated this blackout? What if they'd cut the power at the breakers, and now they were waiting for a chance to kill the remaining survivors? I held my breath, worried that someone was watching me out in the darkness. Of course, unless the killer had night vision goggles, they wouldn't be able to see me. But no matter how much I appealed to reason, I couldn't tamp down the fear rising inside of me. If Haruko really wasn't the killer, then the only other conclusion was that we were being slaughtered by some unknown assailant who could disappear and reappear at will. Seemed like that could probably find me right away in this darkness. We needed to escape as soon as possible. We needed to find somewhere safe. The sound of my heartbeat grew louder. It seemed to be echoing through the whole building. Even if the killer couldn't see me, I could probably find me by sound alone. That's how it felt anyway. Eventually my eyes adjusted into the darkness. I could make out the faint outlines of the stars, the stairs, and other objects. Not the stairs, there was in fact a roof over our head. I haven't gone home yet. I slowly made my way up to the second floor. After the earlier scream, I hadn't heard a single sound from up here. As if everything and everyone had gone dead. Hey, Doctor, do you still write fanfic? Nah, I don't have a lot of leisure time, and this takes most of it. Honestly, I feel like it's better that way. I was never that great at original writing. The girls were probably just keeping quiet. They must be frightened out of their wits. Not how terrifying this killer was, there was no way they could murder 4 people in an instant. I heard the floorboards creak slightly, and I stopped. Someone was right nearby. I thought I could even feel them breathing. My whole body went rigid. I held my breath. Something you were passionate about, I think it must have been good. You would think that, if you've got no experience writing.
トール、そこにいるの？
It was Mari. Even though her voice was quaking with fear, just hearing it at all was a relief. I groped my way through the darkness until I was able to touch Mari.
マリ、なんで出てきたんだ？危ないじゃないか。
We hugged fiercely, there in the darkness, taking comfort in the physical reality of each other's bodies.
だって急に停電してトールに何かあったんじゃないかって思ったらもう。
Mari had risked her life to come check on me. I'd never loved anybody as much as I did in that moment.
とにかくあそこに戻ろう。こんなところにいたらいつ襲われるか分かったもんじゃない。
We went down the hallway, arm in arm. We couldn't tell which door belonged to which guest room, or even where we were in the hallway. After a few wrong doors, we finally arrived at the girl's room.
入りますよ。
Door was unlocked. Two of us slipped inside, closed the door, and pressed the button to lock it. We felt our way over to the bed in the darkness, and looked for a place to sit. Just then I stepped on something soft and almost fell. Had to lean on Mari for support.
しっかりしてよ、トール。
I know you've been drinking, but I couldn't respond. Just now, that was... The lights in the room came back on. We both screamed in unison. We backed away from the bed and then fell on our butts by the bathroom door. The room was a sea of blood. Jesus Christ, they hit the ceiling. The hell are they doing here? It's gotta be like at least 10 feet. Jesus Christ. Just how high were those ladies' blood pressure? Was that on Keiko? Is that where she died? Does that explain it? I mean, Christ on toast. Last time I saw a crime scene this bloody, it was deliberately painted with outside sources. I was wondering how they would survive without food and water since they have a bath and they get water from there. Yeah, there's that option. And if worse comes to worse, there's always cannibalism. Kanako, Keiko, Aki. Their throats were all slit. Blood was splurting from their necks. Man, getting precise shots to the throat is actually fairly difficult if the other person is struggling. One I could believe, but a 3 combo, I wonder if he, managed to drug them somehow? Maybe he drugged the food supply they brought up before they came. Mari screamed and looked away, trembling as she hit her face in my hand. My chest, rather. I stared at the lurid display in mute horror. Who the hell could have killed 3 girls in cold blood like this? I hadn't heard anything since that first scream. Could the killer have slit the throats of 3 people so quickly that they didn't even have a chance to call for help? If the killer turned the power off, how do they turn the lights on? The same way, I'd imagine. I mean, they weren't in the room when we got here, so they must have been able to get back to the breaker. Had someone snuck up on them in the darkness and cut their throats one by one without making a single sound? Or... Mari's trembling back in disbelief. Mari could have done it. Mari's an expert knife fighter, don't you know? I thought it was said that they turned it on by pressing the light switch. And that wouldn't make sense, would it? They knocked out the lights in the entire building. How strange that she was the only one who'd survived. It was nice to hear she'd been worried about me, but would a lone woman really go wandering off by herself when there was a murderer on the loose? If she were the killer, she'd no reason to be afraid. She could leave the room without the slightest hesitation.
トール、別の部屋に行こう。
Mari was in tears. Was this an act as well? I didn't know what was what anymore. As far as these deaths were concerned, Mari seemed to be the obvious suspect. The other deaths... There must have been at least some of those killings that she couldn't have committed. So I told myself. But I didn't have time to recall the exact details of each and every incident. The next thing I knew, Mari was looking up at me.
トール、まさか私が犯人だと思ってるんじゃ。
I mean, actually, as it happens, I don't, but... I didn't reply, but that was essentially the same thing as saying yes.
そ けないじゃない。見てよ。こんなひどいこと。
It's pretty gross.
僕だって信じたいよ。マリのこと本当に好きだったし、軽い気持ちなんかじゃなくて本当に好きだったし。でも
I didn't know what the hell I was saying anymore.
やっぱり信じられないのね。わかったわ。
Mari's voice sounded hollow as she let go of me and got to her feet.
おい、どこ行くんだよ。
殺人鬼と一緒になんて痛くないでしょ。私は自分の部屋に戻るわ。
Mari's words were like ice. A voice somewhere inside told me to keep her from leaving, but I couldn't do it. Away from this gruesome pile of corpses. Away from Mari. I wanted to be alone. Away from everything and everyone. There was nothing left in this world I could trust. Not even myself. I trusted nobody. I followed Mari out into the hall, then returned to my own room, alone. Once inside, I locked the door and collapsed onto my bed. Just go to sleep. That's what I told myself. I didn't care what happened anymore. I was exhausted. My mind, my body... sleepy. I was so sleepy. Then came the longest, most horrifying scream I'd ever heard in my life. It must have lasted a good 10 seconds. Sleep? Yeah, no. What, in my streams? Never. At which point the stream just stopped, as if it had been cut off. And silence. I wondered if this was some sort of trap laid by Mari. No, it couldn't be. If she wanted to kill me, she could have done it earlier, when we were alone together. Or had she determined she wouldn't be able to kill me without catching me unawares? I considered two possibilities, both equally nightmarish. Mari was alive and trying to murder me, or Mari was already dead at the hands of the killer. I felt like the heart had been torn out of me. Nothing mattered anymore. I concluded that no matter which of the two possibilities was true, there was only one thing I could do. I got up from my bed and unlocked the door. Then I decided to crawl back into bed and fell fast asleep. Whoever had committed these awful crimes would come here eventually and murder me. If I died at Mari's hands, so be it. And if Mari was already dead... I smiled at the thought. We'd be together soon. You know, the damnedest thing is, this isn't the first time I've seen a murder victim just unlock their own door because they didn't care if they lived or died anymore. It hasn't quite approached it being a systemic issue yet, but I'm very concerned. Well, whatever the case may be. There's still some more... There's actually still some more options I'd like to see from taking this pathway. But it's been exactly 3 hours since we started stream, so I think I'm gonna call it there. As much as this game left at this point, well, as it happens... You can look here for yourself while I check and see who we're going to raid. Who is live? Who is live? Good night, you too. I don't know who is live right now. What are they streaming? Who is Daddy and what does they do? Rabbit, art. Splatoon 3 is out. Let's go give that a shot. We're gonna be rating Professor Retro. Stay safe, Doctor, until tomorrow. I mean, I'll try. I've been a recurring character for long enough that I'm pretty sure I've got plot armor. But I stand we're rating Professor Retro because they're playing Splatoon 3, and that's a hot new game all the kids are into. I hope you enjoy the stories, and good night.